Suit Charlie tomorrow.
This song he's humming is from a very old animated series called Clutch Cargo. In fact, it ran from March 1959 to 1960, 28 years before this hijacking. Which, if the show was part of the suspect's childhood, presumably, he would be in the age range of about 30 to 40 when this video was made, due to the cartoon becoming popular in the early 60s. However, this is just pure speculation. Even so, some have crafted some interesting theories on who may actually be behind the Max Headroom bombs. Some believe it could have been an employee of WGN, or perhaps a former one based on the comments he made about them in the video, as well as his reference to Chuck Swirsky, while others believe it could have been any random person in the underground hacking communities located around Chicago at that time. It's really hard to determine a suspect in this case, because the motive for the broadcast is unknown. Was it just a joke, a simple prank, or was there a deeper meaning or message behind it? People have been trying to figure it out for years, but still, we really have no idea what the purpose of this even was, let alone who actually committed it. But there are theories on a few specific people that some believe could be behind it. The first suspect on our list is John R. McDougal, aka Captain
Nope.
Midnight, the same person who jammed
Wasn't
the
him.
radio signal and displayed
Why not?
this message
He was
on
in
April
Florida.
7th, 1986, a year prior to the Max Headroom incident. But with the first intrusion, McDougal's motive was clear. He was protesting the price increase for HBO satellite dishes. However, HBO didn't take too kindly to this and promptly contacted the FCC, who launched an investigation and were able to narrow down the list of uplink sites that could have been capable of jamming the signal, and soon it was narrowed down to only 12 stations, at which point all 12 were investigated and McDougal appeared as the prime suspect. As a resident from Wisconsin who so happened to hear a man bragging over a payphone off Interstate 75 in Florida that he was the one to do it. That witness was able to obtain their license plate number, and sure enough, it was McDougal, who it was found out used a teleport uplink station in Florida to commit the signal intrusion at his second job, as he was an electrical engineer. He pleaded guilty to illegally operating a satellite uplink transmitter and was given a $5,000 fine and 1 year of unsupervised probation, no jail time, technically making it possible that he was the one who committed the Max Headroom incident, as he was familiar with the technology, also grew up in the Chicago area, and also fit the age range of the suspect. But this theory has quite a few flaws. First of all, the HBO hijacking had a clear goal and motive, no extra weird stuff, no video, no Max Headroom mask. Second of all, he worked alone, unlike the people in the 1987 intrusions. Also, of course, he lived in Florida at the time, so it doesn't make much sense for him to go all the way to Chicago, have access to the equipment necessary for hijacking, commit the intrusion with accomplices, and then go back to Florida and never be caught, despite being found out relatively quickly for the 1986 jamming. All in all, it's unlikely that it was him, although it does make for an interesting story.
He'd be dead by now, wouldn't he be?
In my opinion, this is the most interesting suspect. Not because the evidence is necessarily the strongest, but because of who this is. The person in question is Eric Fournier, who you might recognize for his work under the name Shay St. John, a character featured on a YouTube channel created by Eric that is a model made of mannequin parts. And the videos featuring his character are known for their disturbing and surreal nature, kind of similar to the Max Headroom incident, although that's not evidence of anything. Unfortunately, the original channel has been deleted. However, there are many re-uploads of these videos. But the theory that he was behind the Max Headroom incident stems from the fact that he lived in Bloomington, Indiana, which is fairly close to Chicago, and played for a band called the Blood Farmers during this time. How does that mean he's responsible for this, you might ask? Well, I guess rumors spread around that he wanted more exposure for their band and their music videos, and so they used equipment from a local TV station to record a music video and broadcast it. But they didn't want to be caught, so they instead just played some weird prank, with Eric being the Max Headroom guy and making stuff up as they went. Yeah, this theory isn't very credible and doesn't really make any sense at all. Even his former bandmates have
Hello.
gone on to debunk this theory. His friend and former bandmate Harry Bergen even even said this about the rumors. Quote, "This is ridiculous bullshit. Eric didn't know anything about video editing when we were in high school. We never made music videos apart from someone maybe videotaping one of our shows. We weren't finished degrees in mass communications and had no access to broadcast equipment. I think the only time the four of us were ever in Chicago together was to see a Pixies concert at the Riviera." And as for Eric himself, he sadly passed away in 2010 at the age of 42.
Ooh.
So yeah, very unlikely that Eric or any of his former band members or associates were involved. And for our last suspects here, we have two brothers, simply called Jay and Kay, who are described in a Reddit post from 12 years ago, titled, "I believe I know who was behind the Max Headroom incident that occurred on Chicago TV in
Pretty good.
1987. The post describes how the OP grew up in Chicago in the early 80s and was a part of the hacking scene, and knew two brothers that he believed were involved. Although he doesn't use any actual names in the post, he refers to them by letters J and K, with him naming Jay as his primary suspect. He describes one of his
Not much gun time right now.
1987
Oh,
at an
yeah.
apartment in LaGrange, Chicago. An apartment owned by Kay and his girlfriend, as well as another unknown hacker referred to as M. He describes seeing a very elaborate setup in the apartment. However, as I said earlier, he mainly suspected Jay. This is because he was said to have a disturbing sense of humor, very similar to the guy in the video. But once again, this isn't really proof of anything. However, he describes another party in the post as such. Quote, "Jay was at the party in the apartment that afternoon. I didn't talk with him directly. Me and the friend of mine that I was there with didn't really talk to anybody that day. But I did overhear what the others were talking about. They were referring to Jay planning to do something big over the weekend. I remember that word big because it piqued my curiosity as to what might be considered big by their standards. I later asked them collectively during the dinner we all had at Pizza Hut later that night what they were talking about earlier, what big was. And someone, probably Kay, told me to just watch Channel 11 later tonight, as a sort of offhanded suggestion. I did happen to be watching Channel 11 later that night, having forgotten about the whole big conversation earlier that day. I saw it, but I didn't put two and two together at the time. I have no idea how he didn't remember that big conversation while watching the channel that same night, or how he didn't put two and two together. But point is, he suspected that Jay was the Max Headroom guy. The brother referred to in the video was his brother Kay, and the woman was Kay's girlfriend. However, in a later post, the OP claimed that both Jay and Kay were formally excluded as suspects in the incident, as he described how he, as well as Rick Klein, the curator of the Museum of Classic Chicago Television, spoke with engineers and technicians working at various Chicago TV stations, including WGN and WTTW, the two stations that were hijacked in '87. Throughout this investigation and interview process, they were able to determine that it was basically impossible for this to have been an outside job, or in other words, someone working at or close to one of these stations would very likely be the ones with the knowledge and technology capable of committing this intrusion. So yeah, looks like it isn't these guys either. So who could it have really been then? There isn't any solid evidence pointing to any individual or group. All we have is circumstantial evidence and this pretty creepy and disturbing broadcast, which has captivated people for decades, due to the mystery and intrigue of why and how such a TV hijacking could take place. We know some bits and pieces about the possible identity of the Max Headroom guy, and we now know it likely had to be some sort of inside job. But that's really all we have. So unless someone credible comes forward claiming to know the culprit or claiming to actually be them, it's unlikely this case will ever truly be solved. But maybe there's something we missed. Some small clue that could lead us to who really committed the most disturbing hijacking in TV history.
Western Michigan is a fast-growing region full of unique experiences and traditions, and Culligan has a long history of providing custom solutions to address the area's water worries, like bacteria, lead, nitrates, and PFAS. Culligan, water you love since 1936.
This episode of Mythbusters. Are Allied bombers wrecking your dreams of